Hello, I'm the Game Professor, and welcome to Games as Lit 101. No Man's Sky certainly has been polarizing, hasn't it? The massively hyped game made some huge promises, some of which it delivered on, some of which it didn't, and some of which were just plain made up by the hype machine. How well it measures up to those expectations has been the subject of fierce debate ever since the game released, leading to a ton of think pieces, some seriously mixed reviews, and even a baffling quest for refunds even after hours and hours of playtime. And between all that, there is already more than enough talk out there about whether No Man's Sky is good, successful, or what have you. So let's just set all of that aside for a moment and try and examine one particular element of this game: its approach to emergent narrative. I've talked about this in more detail in a previous episode, but here's a quick recap. Emergent narrative is a story that develops through the process of play. So rather than being told a story through dialogue, cutscenes, etc., a game provides the player with a setting to be in, a set of mechanics to guide your experience, and the freedom to simply do what you want. Your actions from there form their own story. But of course, exactly how those emergent elements are provided and presented can change a lot about the game. DayZ and Minecraft both challenge you to survive in a large and fairly hostile environment, but DayZ's emphasis on weaponry and survival is very distinct from Minecraft's emphasis on discovery and building. Similarly, FTL, Faster Than Light, and This War of Mine are both roguelikes that provide semi-randomized story elements to help you craft a unique story each time you play, but the tone and thematic elements of both are vastly different. The result of these differences is that even though these kinds of games generally leave it up to you to create any meaningful series of events through the gameplay, that doesn't mean that they can't have intent towards a certain feeling, atmosphere, or even literary theme. If we're going to examine No Man's Sky from this perspective, we need to take a look at the various mechanics of the game that form something of a structure for your emergent experiences. Let's look first at the game's most obvious emergent element, the procedurally generated planets, wildlife, and entire universe. Whatever you may think about the game, it is a huge technical accomplishment. A decade ago, we were amazed that games could let you see a mountain in the distance and walk straight over to it and climb it. Now we have entire planets, and we can fly straight to them and scour every inch of them. The game is absolutely huge, which means you'll not only never run out of places to explore, you'll literally never be able to explore everything. That's a kind of vastness that video games have never accomplished before, and it's an important element of what the game is trying to communicate. But even though you can't possibly explore everything, that doesn't stop the game from encouraging you to explore everything you can. No Man's Sky is an exploration game through and through. The survival elements, combat, and upgrade systems are all fairly simple, even uninteresting on their own. They all exist to facilitate your exploration. The resource collection is little more than incentive to get out and look around. The ability to name flora and fauna allows you to make your mark for other players to see. The combat is less about exciting battles and more about defending yourself as you journey across a planet. Even your interaction with the various races is defined by how many words of their language you've discovered on your journeys, and what story elements there are center entirely around ancient, unknown wonders that require you to travel the universe to unlock their secrets. It's also notable that all this moving around on such a large scale means there's no such thing as home. The closest thing to it is your ship, but even then, that means home is also a method of constant travel, not to mention you'll sell or trade it for a better one the moment the opportunity arises. Essentially what we're seeing here is a game whose every mechanic is centered around encouraging the game's primary aesthetic of play. No Man's Sky wants you to explore and discover new things, and wants you to enjoy discovering new things. And even if the activities that you do in the game aren't interesting on their own, they all augment that one simple goal. No Man's Sky is impossible to fully explore because it wants you to never run out of things to find. Naturally, this means much of what you'll be doing in the game, and consequently the meat of the stories you'll be crafting through your actions, has to do with going to new places and finding new things. Which of course means that if the game's going to succeed in this area, the things you find need to be interesting in some way. Many will doubtlessly argue that the game could use more variety in the worlds and alien life it generates, but we can still plainly see the effort that went into making each new discovery an exciting one. Most advocates for the game will cite certain moments of it as transcendent. The night sky of a moon with its planet looming above your head, a planet of clear blue waters with an orange sky and thick, gorgeous fauna, the first time you take off from a planet and see the universe stretched out before you. No Man's Sky is clearly designed not just for you to go from place to place, but to occasionally encounter something beautiful. So No Man's Sky uses its mechanics to encourage exploration of its procedurally generated universe in search of unique and beautiful visuals, atmospheres, and experiences, but has generated such a large playable space that it's literally impossible to actually see everything there is to see in the game. So the question is, what idea or feeling is No Man's Sky trying to instill in us through this? We can say that No Man's Sky is a game about exploration and discovery, but that's simplifying it a bit too much. No Man's Sky isn't simply wanting you to see cool things, it's wanting you to continually move through a gallery of them, stopping long enough to see what's worth seeing and moving on to the next cool thing, never able to see or understand it all because there's simply too much of it. In other words, No Man's Sky uses your ability to go anywhere and see anything as a way to make you feel small and lonely for being incapable of going everywhere and seeing everything. Which, in the context of the game's literally cosmic scope and ambition, is a pretty fitting goal. Many games can make you gawk at their sheer size and detail, and form some interesting stories about discovering it all. But in a gaming industry where games tend to be bigger and more content-heavy specifically so you can have more to experience, No Man's Sky is using its size to emphasize that you can't actually experience it all. The aim is not to make you feel immersed in a large, detailed world, but to make you feel lost in a universe so big that even the impact you leave is, in the grand scale of things, absolutely minuscule. Even the biggest games build their worlds specifically so you have a lot to discover. No Man's Sky builds an entire universe just to hammer in the fact that you can't possibly discover everything. Neil Armstrong once said of his experience on the moon that, contrary to many of the world's expectations, I didn't feel like a giant. I felt very, very small. That's what No Man's Sky is trying to instill in the player. As you play the game, as you craft your own narrative of discovery and resource acquisition, the feeling permeating the entire experience is your inescapable smallness, and the fact that the planets you discover, the animals you name and befriend, the systems you fly through, they mean so little in the grand scheme of things. Your actions craft your narrative, and that narrative, no matter your experiences, is tiny and insignificant in the face of the game's endless universe. And that's just one game's approach to emergent narrative. If there are any others you would like me to take a look at in the future, feel free to suggest them in the comments. If you enjoyed the episode, please remember to like it and subscribe to the channel, and check the description for links to Games is Lit 101 on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. Next time, we'll be talking about literary perspectives and how the first-person perspective in video games may actually more closely resemble a different perspective in traditional literary terms. And, of course, in a couple weeks I will be analyzing the first season of Telltale's Walking Dead series. So until next week, class dismissed.